This is the Peugeot 5008, a fantastic 7-seat large SUV which has just had a facelift. But is it even better than before? In this video, we're going to run you through all the changes and tell you everything that you need to know about this car. But first, do make sure you're subscribed to our channel because we've got lots of new car content every week. And if you want to save £1,000 off a new 5008, you can do so on our website. So just go to whatcar.com or search for What Car Deals.
The 5008 follows a story that's familiar with quite a few other cars. When it was first launched by Peugeot in 2010, it was an out-and-out MPV. And as a people carrier, it was a very good car.
But during that car's lifetime, buying tastes changed. People still needed people carriers, but they didn't necessarily want to be seen in one. So the MPV market shifted to SUVs.
And that's exactly what Peugeot delivered with the second generation 5008 in 2017, transforming the functional and practical first gen model into the fashionable and practical second gen. It's a large SUV that we've always rated as very good indeed. So with nothing obviously wrong with it, what is new exactly with this midlife facelift?
Well, it's mainly styling changes, and you can see up front, it does look very different from before. So it's got this new grille. There are two different grilles available that stretches out over here. You've also got these useless black bits of plastic on the front as well. And the lights are very different from before. So front and rear, you get LEDs as standard. At the rear, there's now scrolling indicators. And also, the biggest change perhaps in the look are these fang-like LED daytime running lights, which are also the indicators. Now, the whole look, it's more modern, it's sharper than before, and it also brings it in line with Peugeot's other new products, like the recently facelifted 3008, which itself is very similar to this car, of course. Plus, this now looks quite similar to the 208, the 2008, and the 508 in Peugeot's lineup. There's also now room for the 5008 badge on the bonnet.
What hasn't changed are the 5008's rivals. So if you're looking at this large SUV, then you may also be considering cars like the Kia Sorento, Nissan X-Trail, Seat Tarraco, and Skoda Kodiaq. Another interesting change with this facelift is Peugeot dropping SUV from the 5008's official name. The second generation model was initially called the 5008 SUV to help people understand the transformation from an MPV. But now everyone's got the message. SUVs are everywhere, so it's been dropped for the facelift.
So it isn't an MPV, but it is extremely practical. You can see it has a massive boot, and in fact we can fit 10 carry-on size suitcases below the parcel shelf in the back of the 5008, which is the same number you'll get in an Audi Q5 and also the Kia Sorento, and it's more than you'll fit in the Skoda Kodiaq and the Mazda CX-5. And the reason this boot's practical, it's not just because of the sheer floor available to you to store stuff in, but it's the simple boxy dimensions of this as well. So there's no wheel arch intrusions, there's no awkward lumps in the floor. It's just really simple, easy space to use. Plus, it's really tall from the boot floor up to the parcel shelf here. And another good thing is that although this is a kind of high riding SUV, it isn't actually that high to this loading point here from the ground. And also because the boot floor runs flush to the tailgate, it means if you're lifting something really big and heavy into the back, it is as easy as you'd reasonably hope it to be in a car like this. There's also another handy trick that the 5008 has. So not only can you fold that middle row flat, but you can also do the same for the front passenger seat, on allure trim and above that is. Plus, yes, you can fold these seats in the middle row completely flat, but you can also slide and recline each one individually, which is brilliant. Plus, don't forget, it's a 7-seater. So let's move the parcel shelf back, or of course, you could, if you did want to put it in 7-seat configuration, leave it somewhere else entirely outside of the car. Then all you've got to do is lift up this bit of the boot floor, which reveals the seat. Pull this back, set it up, put that back, and there you go. Plus, you've even got some underfloor storage with the rearmost seats in place, and it's all very simple. What about these rearmost seats then? Well, the rear doors open pretty wide, and the middle row has quite a lot of movement in it, so getting into the back is actually fairly easy. But once you're here, they are better suited for smaller children. You'll still be able to get a couple of 6-footers in the back, but they'd only really put up with being back here on short journeys. You can see I'm just under 6 foot, and if I want to sit up straight, my head is touching the roof there. And as for leg and knee room, I've had to move this seat a little bit further forwards so that my legs aren't completely crushed, and then it does offer a little bit of room. So really, in fairness, as 7-seat SUVs go, you've got more space back here than you would in a Kodiaq. And it's not ridiculously cramped. You could use these for adults occasionally, but a Kia Sorento is more spacious back here. It's also worth knowing that not every large SUV offers a 7-seat option. So cars like the Citroen C5 Aircross, the Mazda CX-5, they are strictly 5-seaters only. In the back here as well, you've got a cup holder and a couple of trays, but strangely, only on this side. That side doesn't get a cup holder. For some context, these two seats are as far back as they'll go, but the one that I'm sat in here is in exactly the same position as when I was sat in the third row there. So you can see I've still got an all right amount of leg room, to be honest, and it's not an unreasonable compromise for this person to have to make on their space in order to fit someone into that third row behind them. But overall, the space in this middle row is good rather than outstanding. So a Kodiaq and a Sorento are both a little more spacious in this middle row here. But what the 5008 is very good at is fitting 3 people side by side up here, because there's a really good amount of shoulder room and also a completely flat floor, which those rivals don't have. You've also got Isofix mounts in these 3 seats, but none in the third row, and none for the front passenger seat either. But go for Allure Premium trim or above, and you get these trays on the backs of the front seats, as well as these window blinds. But do be careful if you fancy going for the optional panoramic sunroof. We don't have it on this car, but if you do have it, then yes, it will make it feel airy and light inside, but it really cuts into the headroom available. You'll also notice a slight reduction in headroom up front if you go for that panoramic sunroof, but really, with or without it, it's still very spacious up front. A Sorento or a Kodiaq might just offer a little bit more room here and there up front, but you wouldn't describe the 5008 as anything other than very generous when it comes to space. But all that practicality was exactly the same before in the 5008. What's new is this 10-inch touchscreen infotainment system, and there's also been an update to the 12.3-inch digital driver display. Now with this screen here, it's said to offer better graphics than before. You can now put a 3-finger tap on the screen and it will take you to the home page. There's also a slightly new layout with these shortcut buttons on either side of the screen. Plus you get a 3-year subscription to TomTom, which includes satellite navigation and live traffic updates. But that's kind of irrelevant because you should definitely just be using Google Maps or Waze through Apple CarPlay or Android Auto instead.
The system itself is positioned high up on the dashboard, so it's easy to reach and see, but we still prefer the systems you get in the Sorento, Tarraco and Kodiaq, because the Peugeot system still has quite a complicated layout. A lot of the icons are too small and it's quite laggy in its responses. Entry-level Active Premium trim gets a smaller 8-inch screen, but everything above that gets a 10-inch screen like the one we've got here. And it's helpful having these permanent shortcut buttons on the side to get to the climate controls quickly, but it does mean the rest of the screen is only about 8 inches anyway.
Every 5008 gets this 12.3-inch digital driver display, and that's impressive because lots of other rivals either don't offer a digital driver display or they charge extra for one. Now it has been updated with this facelift, and the change is apparently that the black on the screen is a deeper, darker shade than it was before. And that's the case to try and create more of a contrast with the graphics on the screen to make it clearer to see. But the question is, can you definitely see that digital driver display? Because with Peugeot's iCockpit layout, you get this small steering wheel, and the idea is that you look over it to the driver display rather than through it as you would on a more conventional car. But the problem that we've seen in basically every new Peugeot released is that it simply doesn't work for every driver. So some people, if they want to have the steering wheel in a position where they feel comfortable, it might also cut off a bit of the driver display for them as well. However, the 5008 doesn't suffer from this quite so much as other Peugeot products. And with this facelift, there's been no fundamental change to the driving position, so that remains the case here. You still, in this car, have a pretty good chance of having the steering wheel where you want, sitting where you want, and still being able to see the digital driver display. There's also a lot of adjustment in that steering wheel, and also in the seat. However, if you do want electrically adjustable seats, you've got to go for range-topping GT Premium. But if you do, then you get a massage function thrown in with it as well for an extra bit of luxury. And adjustable lumbar support comes with every trim apart from entry-level Active Premium. Another couple of changes on this new facelift is that if you go for either of the GT models, then you get this frameless rear view mirror, which looks quite clean. Plus you get front and rear parking sensors and a reversing camera as standard, and every 5008 now has keyless start. But what about the build quality in here? Well, it certainly looks really nice, doesn't it? It's always had a really eye-catching design, and it's exactly the same case with this facelift as well. Especially on this model, it's got a really nice two-tone Alcantara finish here. Looks really good, and you definitely have to spend quite a lot more money to get an SUV that offers the same sense of occasion as the interior of this 5008. But the build quality itself, what's that like? Well, it is still, as it was before, pretty robust. There are some rivals that do it a little bit better, but there's certainly not a lot at all to complain about in here. Now, does the driving experience match the exciting and extravagant interior? Well, I'd probably be lying if I said that it did, because, come on, it's a large SUV, isn't it? It can only be so exciting to drive. But the 5008 still does lots of things really well on the road. There's a lot to like. We'll start with the engines though, which perhaps isn't the strongest part of what the 5008 offers on the road, because when this second generation model first came around, it had some petrols, some diesels, and that was fine with everything else that was available at the time. But now with this facelift, looking at the other rivals that are available now, you've got hybrids, mild hybrids, plug-in hybrids. You've even got the Kodiaq VRS as a performance variant of a large SUV. So they haven't done anything fancy with the engines for this facelift. It means you've still got two pretty conventional petrol engines and two diesel engines. Looking at the petrols, you might think that the PureTech 130, being the entry-level option and only having 129 brake horsepower, would be a little bit too weedy for a big SUV like this. But the reality of it is, that's actually our favourite engine with this car. Okay, it's not the quickest thing in the world, but it's still certainly quick enough, and it's got that low rev shove that you need. So if you're carrying lots of people or you've got loads of luggage for your holiday or something, it will still really quite easily manage motorway journeys, get you up a hill. It's not an engine that you'd buy with this car thinking, oh well, I better not pile it up with loads of stuff because it's not going to manage. You absolutely don't need to think that with that engine. And then when you factor in all the running costs as well, it's the cheapest in the lineup, the fuel economy is still pretty good, then it makes a lot of sense. If you do definitely need more power, then the car that we're in today is the PureTech 180, which is a fair bit quicker. But it's also more expensive, so we'd still stick with the PureTech 130. For the diesels, it's a pretty similar story. You've got a Blue HDI 130 and a Blue HDI 180. Of the two, really the 130 offers what most people are going to need, so we'd stick with that rather than spending more money to get the more powerful engine. The 5008 has accurate but fairly quick steering, which does take a bit of getting used to when placing the car in corners, but it's great when you're parking and want to add lots of lock-on quickly. Ultimately, the VW Tiguan steers a little more fluently than the 5008, and also that car, as well as the Kodiaq, the Tarraco, offers better body control and more grip. But if you're buying a large SUV, you're probably not that interested in ultimate handling. And if that's you, then the 5008 is easy to drive, capable, and sure-footed. It isn't, though, available with four-wheel drive. Instead, you can add grip control, which is an electronic traction control system that includes hill descent control and works in conjunction with special mud and snow tyres. It lends a hand in slippery conditions, but it won't match the extra traction of proper four-wheel drive if the going really gets tough. The Sorento, X-Trail and Kodiaq all have versions that offer four-wheel drive. So the front-wheel drive 5008 might not be ideal transportation around your farm, but it is very comfortable on the road. It's relatively softly sprung, but still well controlled, and it's actually just as comfortable as the really impressive Kia Sorento, which means that it's one of the most comfortable large SUVs that you can buy. The automatic gearbox is pretty good for the most part. It shifts smoothly, and you now get a drive mode selector as standard with your automatic gearbox after the facelift. But the Kodiaq and the Tarraco both offer nicer manuals than you get in the 5008. We would still save our money and stick with the cheaper manual if we had the choice, but the Kodiaq, the Tarraco, they're just slicker gearboxes, and in the 5008 you've got quite a springy clutch and a relatively vague gear lever action as well, so it's a little disappointing in that respect. One slightly annoying Peugeot thing that remains though is the fact that for the automatic headlights you can twiddle this stalk to auto and they will forever be automatic. But for the wipers, you've got to push down on the stalk, then you're given a fancy graphic. But then when you stop the car, get out, get back in it and start it again, it wipes the memory of it being in automatic mode for the wipers. So you've got to push down on the stalk again to turn it on, which is just quite annoying. It would be easier if it matched what you can do with the headlights and just gave you one setting you can leave there forever and forget about. But still, great inside, great on the road. Here are a few other things you need to know about the 5008. The 5008 is good value compared to its rivals. It's cheaper than an equivalent Skoda Kodiaq and much cheaper than the Kia Sorento. The PureTech 130 with a manual gearbox is our pick of the lineup, and while it didn't achieve the official claimed WLTP fuel economy figure of 46 miles per gallon, it did get 36 miles per gallon in our real world testing, which for a petrol in a big SUV is no bad result.
There's also a new night vision feature on GT and GT Premium as an optional extra. Through your driver display, it can show you cyclists, pedestrians, or animals in the distance, but it's a pretty expensive option. There's also a new black pack which you can add as an option on GT and GT Premium, which just adds a lot of black finishes in various places around the car. Plus, GT trim upgrades you to full LED headlights with a fog mode. That reduces their intensity and the glare when you activate the rear fog lights.
The 5008 is well equipped, but our pick of the lineup is mid-spec Allure Premium. It gets everything in the trims below it, like 2-zone climate control, 18-inch alloys, front and rear parking sensors and a reversing camera, plus that foldable front seat, keyless entry and some nice ambient interior lighting. The trims above that are pretty expensive, so we wouldn't spend the extra unless you need to go for one of the more powerful engines, which are only available in those upper trim levels.
It's a safe car too, with automatic emergency braking, lane departure warning, e-call emergency assistance and speed limit recognition as standard. Go for Allure trim and you get lane keeping assistance, automatic high beam, blind spot monitoring and a driver attention alert system. It will also protect you well in a crash. Euro NCAP awarded the 5008 the full 5 stars, and while the individual scores weren't quite so high as the incredibly safe Toyota RAV4, it was still very good across the board.
The 5008 is stylish, good to drive, really practical. It is definitely one of our favourite large SUVs. The changes for the facelift really aren't particularly groundbreaking in any way, but that doesn't detract at all from what is already a fantastic car. If you want even more space, then the Kia Sorento is a slightly better bet, but still, the 5008 is a thoroughly recommendable large SUV. If you want even more information on the car, go to whatcar.com, where you can also save more than £1,000 off the new 5008. And while you're there, you can browse through our list of deals from our trusted dealer network. And do make sure you're subscribed to our channel for lots of new car content. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, it'd be great if you gave it a like, and we'll see you next time.